part of what I thought that I was being asked to do. So we can address that in the future. That I've done a training on that unto itself.
Gotcha.
Oh, I sound like a religious experience.
Your volume's low. Just
My volume?
yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm still learning how, believe it or not, I'm still learning how to Zoom, and me being accused of low volume, usual thing.
Well, Daniel, welcome. I want to be respectful of your time. So if you want to start and I can admit people in as we go, I'm happy to get this started and welcome and thank you. And Meryl, thank you for the introduction.
You're welcome, and I am trying to adjust my volume, of which I do not know how to do. I'll just speak loud. Hopefully that's loud enough.
Yeah, or maybe just come a little. Can you come a little closer to the mic?
So what we're going to be covering tonight is navigating SSI. That's going to be the main program that I'm going to be focusing on, but I'm also going to be touching on additional issues that are interconnected with SSI. And as I tell people in most of my training, benefits are very much like a dysfunctional family. They do not make any common sense. They never have and never will. They're based on laws that are made by lawmakers. And although many times the lawmakers are well intended, the end result of the law can be very confusing. And as a result, people get victimized. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start. And I'm going to start with a warning. You know, when you deal with Social Security as a program, there are so many rumors and negative experiences that people focus on versus what is true and what is bad. Example, oftentimes people will say, the first time you apply for Social Security, you're going to get denied. Well, that does happen in 70% of the cases. But if you put together a case in a way that Social Security is able to respond to it and understand it and see, you know, what's being presented, it can be granted. In my private practice, I'm at about 87%. So be aware that people may have experience, but that does not necessarily mean that's the way it has to be. The other thing is there's a lot of confusion in the program names and acronyms. So be aware as you enter into this world and deal with SSI, don't start speaking what I call acronyms. Make sure that whoever you're talking with is clear and that you are always on the same name of the program. So that, you know, you're discussing it correctly. It's like twins, you know, they look alike, they sound alike, but, you know, they're separate from each other. Also, too, when you go online, please be aware that there are great things that are written up, and sometimes they're clearly written when the date of the publication is, and sometimes they're not. You know, I'll do online research and go, oh, wow, this is really 4 years old, so the numbers aren't current, so I'm not able to use it. So be aware that publications and or websites may have dated materials because some of the numbers in these different programs change. With the warning given, here we go. I'm going to start speaking some what I call acronyms. Social Security acronyms. SSA stands for Social Security Administration. It does not stand for a program. If you say your SSA benefit, you're saying your benefit that could be retirement, disability, it could be anything that Social Security administers. So it's kind of like saying, I have a car, but you don't know if it's a 4-door, a 2-door, or what it actually is. And I got the car through Toyota. Well, saying Toyota doesn't identify what the vehicle is. So when you say SSA or Social Security Administration, it is the whole administration, and it is not a program. Oftentimes it's incorrectly used. And you'll see it all over the Social Security website. They're guilty of it. It's a great program, but the website can be very confusing because it's a combination of them actually quoting the their attempt to try to simplify things and coming up with some common language, which often creates more confusion than not. SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. We are not going to be getting into that particular program. When I do what is SSDI about, I get into explaining the three ways that you can qualify, of which could be based on your contributions, the contributions of a parent, or as a surviving spouse. SSI, which is what we're going to focus on today, which is supplemental security income. Supplemental security income. People often see SSI and think it stands for Social Security income. It does not. The program is a supplementing program, and we'll be going over how that program is established. Now, another acronym that people need to be aware of, because it comes in many different places, is SGA, which stands for Substantial Gainful Activity. And that's a dollar amount of $1,040, $470, and that amount changes every year. And that is an amount that is used in multiple areas when either defining disability or dealing with some of the different programs and how working impacts it. Now, for individuals that are visually impaired, substantial gainful activity for a person who is blind is $2,460. And the reason why that is because they had a lobby, went in and got the law changed specifically for that community. And you'll see that different communities have different laws within Social Security. Now, let's get into the definition of disability. And this is where people get into the most challenges, in that a lot of people say, well, my doctor says that my child is disabled, and my child has a diagnosis of blah, 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 blah. Social Security is not diagnosis based. It's based, you can have a diagnosis and two people can manifest it two completely different ways. Two people with stage 4 cancer, one may be fully able to work and the other one is totally disabled based on the treatment. They both have stage 4 cancer in my example, and what makes the difference is, what does the medical record say and how does it articulate the limitations of the individual? Now, the definition of disability, it's multiple slides here. An individual is unable to engage in any, here's that term, substantial gainful activity due to a medically determinable physical or mental impairment or impairment. So they're saying that dollar amount the individual is not able to earn based on their disabling condition, and for this year it's $1,470. Now, the result of that impairment, and this is quoted specifically from the website, the result of that impairment has lasted or is expected to last 12 months or is expected to result in death. I used to work back 30 years ago. I started in the HIV/AIDS community and people were dying, and they weren't being granted in time. They actually had to create a special provision because there's going to be a result of that, unless the medical record is acknowledging it in the way that Social Security sees it, people don't get denied, or they sometimes may not live long enough for the Social Security process to be completed. No, Social Security considers the inability to perform any kind of work. So they're going to take into account the age, the education, and the work experience of that individual. Now I see that there are some questions here. I'm not sure how to do this, so if I knock you all out. So I'm going to take questions at this point. There's 4 things in the chat box. Okay, I'm not sure.
I don't think there are any questions. I think that we're just discussing about muting people, so we're good.
All right, well, thank you. Just want to be aware of what's going on in this virtual world where my forte is classrooms where I'm actually looking at people. Okay, so that being said, now Social Security, when they decide for both SSI and or SSDI, because they have the same definition of disability, every time they evaluate for disability, there's a process that they apply uniformly to everyone. And it's the sequential evaluation process. And it's a 5-step process. So step 1 is, are you working? And if you are you engaging in SGA? Stephen Hawkins, we can say we know he was disabled, but he earned over SGA. Therefore, according to Social Security, he wasn't disabled. So he was earning over the substantial gainful activity amount. And even though he had a significant disability that was apparent, there was a way that he found that he was able to work and earn that substantial gainful activity. The second thing is they want to be aware, is the condition severe? So this is where they're going to say, okay, are we dealing with a condition, that's going to have a likelihood of improving in the next year? Because the definition of disability is that you're unable to work for at least a year or more. So if they see that it's severe based on reviewing the medical records, they're going to go ahead and look at a book which has what's called the listing levels of impairment. Now, this is something that many people don't know about, although the Social Security website created this as a portal for people to actually understand how they think and the process of making a decision. So let's take a second and look at the listing level of impairment. The listing level of impairment is also called the Blue Book because everything in Social Security has 1 or more names. And you'll even find that the acronyms don't even match the words they use. But the Blue Book is an excellent source to be able to evaluate, how a particular diagnosis needs to manifest itself to qualify at step 3, so that at step 3, you're in the program. So when you go to the Blue Book, there is the definitions for adult and children. Please be aware, under the age of 18, the definition of disability is different than once an individual turns 18. This is why you may have a child on SSI in a household where the income is low and they meet the definition of disability. They turn 18 and all of a sudden Social Security does a new review to evaluate if they meet the adult definition. So when you go in, you want to go to adult, and they actually go into symptoms. So they have musculoskeletal, speech, sensory, the respiratory. You click on the symptom, the type of condition it is, and then it literally will, as an example, mental disorders. It'll list out all of the diagnosis and how the condition needs to meet the criteria. So as an example, we have schizophrenia, it's 1203, paranoid or other psychotic disorder. And then here is how it specifically lists how the condition has to manifest itself. And notice it even says under A, medically documented, persistent, either continuous or intermittent, one or more of the following. So it's like almost a recipe. So when you have a diagnosis and you're looking in Social Security's Blue Book to understand, to know if it qualifies as an automatic qualifier at step 3, you look up the condition and see if it meets the specific criteria. And notice it's or, and then it also will have and in this particular example. Now, the sequential evaluation process If you do not meet listing level of impairment, and you don't have an automatic qualifier, this is where they review past relevant work. So they want to know if the individual who's applying has any past relevant work, and they look back approximately 15 years or whatever the work history of the individual is, and determine with the disabling condition they have, are they able to do work that they did? If they're not, then they go on to step 5 and they evaluate, is there capacity for any work based on their age and education? So part of the challenge when it comes to Social Security is that individuals do not realize that there is a process that Social Security does to evaluate the disability. Now, what I like people to be aware of when they're documenting, whether it be in a log, a diary, or the medical record, and they're talking about a symptom, let's use neuropathy as an example. If a person has neuropathy and it says neuropathy, that doesn't mean anything to the reader. Now, if we say a person has neuropathy that occurs daily and the duration is for 3 to 4 hours a day, and the severity is on a scale of 1 to 10, an 8, now all of a sudden that symptom has been explained in a way that allows the reader, which would be somebody at Social Security's Disability Determination Services, to understand how that symptom impacts that individual. This is an area that is essential, that records have the details of the symptoms, and the symptoms tell the story of the individual. Now, when the application is done, you deal with the local office, and then it is sent off to Disability Determination Services. They have a medical evaluator who they actually have a doctor, and then they also have a non-medical evaluator who actually processes. So be aware that when it's at the local office, it can take, depending upon how busy they are, when the application is turned in, anywhere from 1 to 8 weeks just to get processed. And sometimes they get set aside and you have to rattle the door to say, where are we at with this? Then when it goes to the state office, which is Disability Determination Services, and typical in Social Security, sometimes they'll call it the state office, and other times they'll call it Disability Determination Services. That's when the medical review comes in, and that's when the calling for medical records come in. Now, most people who apply for Social Security often will say, well, I went to one of the Social Security doctors. Well, that tells me there's a problem, because the only time they have you see one of their doctors, which they actually are not doctors that work for Social Security, they're contractors, they do what's called a consultative exam, is because either the records didn't make it or the records do not have current information. It's not uncommon, big pitfall, that individuals will have an adult child with a disability, and you had all kinds of testing at age 13 and a neuropsych eval and all kinds of elaborate tests that clearly show disability at age 13. I'm using this as an example. The child, because they've stabilized, is not seeing the doctor very often and not seeing a psychiatrist. So there's no medical records that are current. Well, the parents say, well, nothing has changed. Well, unless there is an existing provider within the last 6 to 12 months that has made reference to what's in that neuropsych eval, that's aged information. And then they send the person off into a consultative exam with the contractor who's operating in a strip mall, and the person gets denied. And sometimes those consultative examinators are not ethical. They will write up a report as if they actually spent more than 15 minutes with an individual evaluating, and they're supposed to evaluate, if available, there are records. So consultative examinations, you want to avoid them by making sure that the records are current and they actually arrive. So there is the initial application. And then if you get denied, there's a reconsideration. And then you file for a hearing, and that's when you go in front of a judge. And initial and recon an individual can handle, but if you're going to go through the hearing, I recommend that you hire an attorney. If you work with a good attorney, they may actually be able to get what's called an on-the-record decision. And that's when Social Security gets all of what they needed, which they didn't get at the initial or the recon, because providing them the same thing without any new stuff is asking me to look at the vehicle that is not moving. It's in the same position and telling me there's something different about it. You're going to come up with the same conclusion. If you lose at the hearing, there is appeal counsel review, and then finally, and I've not known cases to go, there can be district court cases. Okay, so I've gone over the Social Security's definition of disability. Let me go ahead and take some questions here so that I can make sure you all are there with me today. This is your opportunity. No questions? Okay, here I go.
So Daniel, you've got SSDI and SSI on there.
Correct.
Are you saying any questions as to what you presented, or can we ask you a question about one of those two?
Yeah, no, what I presented previously, which was the definition of disability for both SSI and SSDI. Now I'm going to get into the specifics of the SSI program. So
Okay.
Definition of disability, developing the medical records, Blue Book listing level of impairment. Any questions on that is what I'm looking for. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
And I don't have my chat open, so I can't see them if they exist.
I'm watching it, Daniel. I'll let you know if somebody comes in.
All right.
And that means you're doing a great job if nobody has questions.
Either that or they're all doing something else.
No.
Okay, here we go. All right, so the SSI program is what we're going to be focusing on. And SSI, as I mentioned previously, stands for Supplemental Security Income. And that particular program does not have any contributions, and eligibility, if you're under age 65, is going to be based on disability and need. So you need to meet that definition of disability that I went over. And then also now I'm going to go over how they evaluate SSI for an individual under the age of 65. And we are talking about adults. So that's going to be somebody over the age of 18. Now, items that are exempt when it comes to what they look at in your income and resources. They exempt a home regardless of its value. They exempt a car regardless of its value, and that started in 2005. They allow liquid assets up to $2,000 for an individual, and for a couple $3,000. This is a number from the 70s, when $2,000 was a significant amount of savings for an individual. What individuals do now often, if they're dealing with SSI, they may have what's called a special needs trust, or they may have an ABLE account, which in California, it's called CalAble, and that allows them to set more money aside. And be aware that Medi-Cal had a huge change in their law, and starting in July of last year, they allowed the resource amount to go up to 130,000. SSI did not change, has not changed, no connection. Where Medi-Cal used to also be 2,000, they actually increased it, where SSI has not increased it. They exempt the items related to the disability of the individual. And then they exempt any household items that you have. So, and that's as of March of 2005. And I mentioned these laws because you may be dealing with people, that have old information. And the truth is that, any, your jewelry or whatever, can be considered to be a household item, but collectibles are not exempt. Literally, I heard of an individual that literally had a bobblehead collection, and they chose to let the worker know that that bobblehead collection was worth $6,000, and they got denied. So collectibles are not exempt if Social Security knows about them. A whole life insurance policy with a face value of less than $1,500. Now, the actual value of the policy, regardless of what it is exempt. But if it has a cash value or surrender value, that can be up to $1,500. That's again an old number. All term life insurance policies of any value. Burial plot or other burial space of any value. We're going over what is exempt. Up to $1,500 set aside specific for burial expenses, again, an old number from the past, and up to $100,000. And I briefly mentioned this previously in an ABLE account. And this is something that I highly recommend, if it's possible, that individual participate in, setting up ABLE accounts for individuals with disability prior to age 26, so that they can actually set aside resources. Now, the benefit, the federal benefit is $914, and that's the federal amount that is available in all states. In the state of California, we have a state supplement. Be aware, not all states have a state supplement, and some states, like the state of Hawaii, has a state supplement that now is zero, but they still have a state supplement. So be aware that every state is different in case you move. The total for California is $1,133.73. And that's paid to an individual based on meeting the income and resources, but also that amount can be different if they're getting free room and board. If an individual is blind or visually impaired, the amount is $1,211. So let's go over briefly when it comes to the SSI program, types of income. There's unearned income. That's any money that's coming to an individual that they're not doing work activity for. After the first $20, it's a dollar for dollar reduction with no maximum. So any money coming to the individual that is not earned, that is coming from alimony or interest or any of those types of things, even SSDI benefits or California State Disability, which is SDI, reduces dollar for dollar SSI. Earned income, they do what's called accountable income calculation. And that's where after the first $20, if not already used, they allow a $65 reduction, exemption, and that again is an old figure. And then the benefits are reduced 50 cents on the dollar for wages. Now here's the big one, in-kind support and maintenance. That's when somebody's getting free room and board. I'm living with mom and dad, and it doesn't cost me anything to live there. Social Security under the SSI program for that 18 prior to 65-year-old is going to attach a value to it. And they reduce the SSI benefit dollar for dollar, not to exceed that year's current amount, which the term of art is in kind, support and maintenance, and it's $304.66. So that amount that I told you of $1,033.73, if somebody's living free room and board will be reduced 304.66. The way that individuals could get around that, one way is to rent a room in the home, or to pay their fair share, because I have some families where there's no mortgage and they make the adult child responsible for numbering, if there are 3 adults, 1/3 of all the expenses to live in the home. And then in other situations, this is a great example of using a CalAble account or an Able account to cover some of the costs or all of the costs of the food or shelter, and then the individual gets the higher benefit amount. I literally have parents that will use a CalAble account, pay themselves as an example, $1,200 a month, that it costs for their child to live there. So the child gets the full SSI benefit. Then the parents turn around and put it back in Able. And it's exempt. It's totally exempt, because Able accounts allow anybody to put money into them up to $17,000 in this calendar year. Okay, when it comes to SSI and SSDI, there are continuing disability reviews. A lot of people in the world of benefits, you're going to hear about workers' comp, and you're going to hear about state disability or short-term disability, or in the world of Social Security disability insurance, there is no such thing as partial or total. It's all or nothing. You need to meet the definition of disability. And if you meet the definition of disability, even though nothing changes, example, you can have an individual in a coma that gets granted Social Security disability, and they're going to have a continuing disability review. And there are 2 types of continuing disability reviews. There's the medical, where they again review what's going on with the individual, and they review medical records again and evaluate, do we have an ongoing disability, and do the medical records continue to support that disability, articulating what's going on with the individual. That's why I tell families, regardless of what the individual's disability is, make sure that the medical records are updated minimally every 6 months, capturing what's going on with the individual. And again, I always remind them, we don't care about the diagnosis. If we're going to mention a diagnosis, we need to talk about what are the limitations connected to that diagnosis that impact that individual. Then there's also a work continuing disability review. If an individual does work activity and they're on the SSI program, as I mentioned previously, they basically, after the deductions, they reduce the benefit 50 cents on the dollar. They'll do work continuing disability reviews to either get the records updated, to make sure that what's there needs to be, and sometimes the income the individual makes is so great that it eliminates SSI and they're actually taken off the program. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Daniel, there's a few questions in the chat. Are you able to see them?
I'm going to see, well, I'm trying because I'm not, oh, there we go. That's how you do it. This Zoom world. Okay, mute themselves. I'm recording. Common ground. Okay. If parents' names on child account, does that matter? Okay, so Mary, if I may use your name, I'll just use your first name. If a parent's name is on a child's account, that doesn't have a problem, but the accounts need to be a total of at or below $2,000. So that's the most important thing. So it doesn't matter if mom or dad's account is, name is on the account. Can any 18-year-old individual use SSA 775 form to get the okay, that's the wrong form number, but yes, the form number they're referring to, and now I'm blanking out on it. It's a form where you report a change in circumstance, And in the change in circumstance with that form, what you're doing is saying, okay, y'all showed that I was getting free room and board, but now I'm going to let you know that actually I'm responsible for either renting a room or my part of the expenses. And then this is how I'm meeting it. As an example, you may be using a CalLabel account. And yes, then you have to provide the information on the CalLabel account. If the SSI recipient is paying their portion of the household expenses, what items? Okay, the main focus is food and shelter. And shelter can be gas, electricity. It is not phone. It is not internet. They're responsible under the SSI program for their food and shelter. And their shelter is either by renting a room in the house or by paying by the numbers of adults. Let's say there's 4 over the age of 18 adults. Then in that example, 1/4 of all the expenses. Now, with some of my families, you know, I have people that have $10,000 a month mortgage. Well, that's not going to work out. So often they'll rent a room for fair market value. And in a $10,000 a month mortgage, not uncommon that the rent would be, as an example, $1,500. And in my example, the individual uses $500 of their SSI and $1,000 of an ABLE account, and boom, they've met the requirement and they can get the full SSI benefit. Okay, for medical continuing reviews, are you suggesting we take them to the doctor every 6 months, not weeks? I recommend every 6 months minimally that the medical record be updated, and it's $7.95, thank you. The medical record be updated so that it continues to tell the truth of the individual. The medical record is your child's or the individual with the disability story. And if the story stops being told, it doesn't exist. Example, you can have a list of symptoms that are clearly documented, and then all of a sudden you stop seeing the doctor for the last year. They go for medical record, and as far as Social Security is concerned, it doesn't exist anymore. You're not dealing with those conditions. That's why it's essential. And thank you, Dulce, for correcting it for $7.95. Does the food need to be purchased separately? No, it does not need to be purchased separately. You just need to show that the individual is either purchasing it separately or participating in the total cost. And it needs to make sense. In other words, if you say, well, Susie is paying $100 a month for the cost of food in the house, well, nobody can live on $100 worth of food. So that's not realistic. It needs to be realistic to the actual, you know, cost of what individuals are paying. I've run out of questions. More questions?
Yes, I have a question. It's about, are you saying that the individual or a child must be update the medical record every 6 months? What about when you have a child who is having appointments with the psychiatrist every month or every 2 months? That means that must be, I mean, part of the update record, right?
Yeah, that's totally fine, as long as the details of what's going on are in the record. Because if that individual is seeing the psychiatrist and they're going through a good spell where everything is stable, although they may still have limitations and the limitations are not being captured in the record, now all of a sudden those limitations are gone. And sometimes individuals, when they see their psychiatrist, I'm doing great, I'm having a great week. And the records may say, patient is doing well, they're stable, they're doing very well. And if you don't continue to mention the limitations, then they're gone.
Okay.
So the 6 month I'm saying is minimum. Never go less than that is what I'm recommending.
Daniel, you mentioned a question about the whole life insurance. Is it the policy owner or is it the insured?
It doesn't matter. You can own the policy. and it could be $1 million policy on your life, it has no value to you. See, what they're looking for is there a product that you can take money out of? And that's where, you know, if it has a cash value type life insurance, they exempt only up to 1,500.
Right, but if I own it,
Huh?
if the parent owns the insurance, the whole life insurance policy, but it's in the offspring's name, it's who owns it, who owns it, or who's insuring? It's insuring.
If it has a cash value, it's who owns it. Because the
Got
cash value cannot be touched by the person it's insuring.
Well, right. Okay. Well, okay. You answered the question because it's who owns it is the hierarchy. Okay. Thanks.
Hi, at what age do you recommend? I say at age 18, if you're able to open up an ABLE account to answer the question. If ABLE accounts have been an amazing resource, even when I have families who have individuals with special needs trust. I'll give you an example. I'll have an individual where the special needs trust is paying their rent. And all of a sudden now, Social Security says, oh, you're not paying your rent. Somebody's paying it for you, and we'll allow it, but we're going to go ahead and put ISM, in-kind support and maintenance, against you and reduce your benefit by the value of that, not to exceed the $304. Now, the special needs trust puts that money into ABLE, and ABLE pays the rent. Oh, it's exempt. No longer an issue. So that's where ABLEs make a huge difference. So Aaron says, so if I'm understanding you correctly, if SSI recipient lives at home, they can pay their portion of food and shelter to their parents, and the parents can take that money and put it back into ABLE account, and the recipients can receive the full. That is 100% correct, Aaron. And Merrill put in the Cal ABLE. Is food stamps? No, food stamps is in the world of benefits. I've been doing it 30 years. I know I don't look old enough, but basically is something new, which is less than 6 years in my world. So food stamps now are provided for individuals that are receiving SSI, where previously, because California added their supplement, they didn't allow you to participate in food stamps. They do allow now, and they are exempt, the receiving of food stamps. Good questions. More questions, please. Keep them coming. Now, Merrill asked me a question. I don't have any slides that I'm going to present on this, but I just want you to be aware of it. And we will be doing a training about this in the future. When an individual's on SSI as an adult, and they have a parent who retires, becomes disabled, or is deceased, that child could become eligible for benefits based on the parent's record or parent's contributions. And that program is called the Disabled Adult Child. And it requires that the records to support disability show that the individual has a disability between 18 and prior to 22. And again, no diagnosis. We're talking about medical records that clearly articulate. And be aware that if you have an individual who's on SSI during that window of time, that does not automatically mean that they're going to be granted in the disabled adult child, because they do not, the term of art is adopt a prior decision. So that is an excellent program. And another issue is that if that child works and that child earns substantial gainful activity, they lose the ability to get benefits based on the parent's record. But in all things benefit, there's always a way around it. What we do is we capture the accommodations that are being done, which often exist for those individuals, formalize it, and we can reduce the value of the wages. So that's a teaser for the upcoming training that we're going to be doing on transitioning from SSI to SSDI as a disabled adult child.
When is that training going to happen? Or,
I don't know. I don't have my calendar.
okay, Colleen, do you know?
No, I don't. Daniel, would you like to provide a training for us in this
Yes,
platform?
I love doing this. This is what I live for.
Great. I didn't know that. So now, yeah. Okay. Well, I will talk. Thanks for
All
asking,
right.
Meryl. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll set that up. Perfect.
So we'll set that up. It is one of the ones that I do. And I can also, if you would like, we can discuss some of the other trainings that I do. And we could actually even start a little series of training for you all so that you all have the information. I tell my families in my private practice, my goal is to get you to where you're comfortable and you have no fear when it comes to dealing with these programs. And it truly is knowledge is power. When you understand how it works and the nuances, you don't get victimized, and you confidently move forward, and it's confidence in a way that's comfortable, so that you can focus on your disability or focus on the needs of your child with the disability, as opposed to going, getting frustrated and getting upset and getting intimidated by Social Security. Be aware that a lot of the workers that you're going to interact with when you come to these programs, many of them are overwhelmed and some of them are burnt out and need to move on. But that doesn't mean you still can't be successful. There are ways that you can do this so that you can have the success that you need. And when we create the series of training, we'll be covering a host of different issues. And I'm hoping that the recording goes online with your website so that people can access it in the future.
Absolutely. And I did have a quick question. So for some of our families that have younger children, when do you think they should start kind of reviewing this process? So I hear 18 and then parents start at like 17, but is there a younger age where they should really start diving into it?
Well, when it comes to treatment, diving in is specific to the disability.
Right.
Comes to the world of benefits, unless we have a low-income family, you're going to focus around age 17 is kind of that 1 year prior to 18 that they're going to be looking at. And let's say you have a neuropsych evaluation that's done at age 13, the child turns 18. If you can connect with that neuropsych evaluator, get an update to verify that all those issues are still there, that's how you do it. So my recommendation is typically around age 17 is when you start really developing the records so that the truth of the individual is captured in a medical record. Also, too, as a parent, you can get to know the Blue Book listing level of impairment, and you can say, my child lives with autism. Now, how does autism spectrum fit in, to the Blue Book? And then look to see, what kind of things need to be captured in the record. Because it's not uncommon that an individual with a disability, as I mentioned previously, stabilizes, and then we stop seeing doctor and we stop talking about it because we want to be positive and focus on Johnny or Susie's abilities, which is fine, as long as the medical records still contain the truth of their limitations. So I never answer a question short, sorry.
Me either.
One of the aspects, right, you were saying in the past, Daniel, is that when they're in high school, there's a lot of documentation going on. So if there's an IEP meeting, there's just a lot of documentation. But when it gets to 17 or around then if assuming the child doesn't go to college, then the documentation tapers off. So you want to kind of get this stuff done when there's in that documentation time frame.
Exactly. And be aware, though, that, depending upon the school system you're in, there are different licenses of people that are doing the evaluations. You can have an MFCC, LCSW, a PhD, and the higher the license, the stronger the results of what they're doing are considered by Social Security. So often, although my social work, LCSWs and MFCCs will often do amazing work with an individual, we try to get their information captured in a PhD, MD record, so then the value of the work they're done and what they've captured is now contained in a record that's going to be acknowledged.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Oh, I see a hand with Erin.
Yeah.
I am just unmuting myself here for a minute. I just have a question, and I'm not sure exactly how to explain it, but I thought I heard you mention something about taking money out of a special needs trust and using it to pay rent or whatever. You get that amount of money dinged against your SSI. Is that correct?
Yeah, anything that, okay, first of all, for it to be a true special needs trust, nothing goes directly to the individual, and expenses can be paid directly, okay? This
Okay.
is not a trust training, but I can tell you what I know about it. The way that you utilize the ABLE account, instead of the rent being paid by the trust, because if the trust pays the rent, it's not an exempt source, and it counts against the in-kind support and maintenance, and the individual will have a benefit reduction. What the special needs trust does is puts it into the ABLE account, and then the ABLE account pays it out.
Okay, and if you take money from the special needs trust and you put it in the ABLE account, that does not go against your SSI, correct?
No, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
ABLE account, grandma could put money in, Aunt Susie can put money in. You can
Okay.
put money in from a special needs trust. You can put money in. The individual can put money in, and also if they do work activity, there are higher amounts that they allow the total, because each calendar year for this year, they allow up to 17,000 to be put into ABLE, so long as the total in the account does not exceed 100,000.
Okay, and I have one more question about that. Actually, I forgot what it was. If I remember it, I'll.
I'm
Oh,
not psychic.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. If you remember it, just put your hand up again.
I will, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Daniel, this was great. Thanks so much. We hopefully the common ground can get you back to talk about transitioning from SSI to SSDI in May or something. I know there's a lot of speakers that are lined up, and there's a lot of interest from a lot of speakers. So
Well, you're most welcome. It's what I love doing. And
yeah, and I've worked with Daniel, by the way, so I've engaged him. He's great, super reliable, super helpful, and I suggested to Colleen that he talk to everyone. So I can vouch for how great he is.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Meryl, and thank you, Daniel. And I would absolutely love, whatever your time frame is. I'll talk to your office and you and see what we can set up for May. Yeah, this is very informative, actually, for me. And it's nice for me to go back to like my Special Olympics athletes and kind of have some information to gather and give them. And it's very informative. Thank you.
My pleasure, truly.
Yeah, thank you. No, pleasure.
Okay, so if that's it, I'm going to see how I sign off of this thing.
You don't, you just stay on it forever. So we might have questions and we'll just continually ask. So just sit there for about another 4 hours.
Okay. With that,
Thanks, Colleen. Thanks, Daniel. Take care.
Yeah, thanks, Meryl. Okay, bye. Hey, Hey, Felicia.
Hi.
How are you?
I've been better. I've had like a crazy bout. Like I think I've been cursed or something.
Oh, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I got diagnosed with breast cancer about a few weeks ago.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's I got a good team and stuff, a lot of processing and what, and then was it my they what is it like a month and a half ago they broke the back of my car window, and which wouldn't have been so bad, but there was a glass shortage, so I was driving around with a shower curtain on the back of my car.
Oh no.
And then
Oh,
they went to go fix it, and they did a horrible job. Like they left the
let
weather-
me stop recording.
Oh.
Hold on one second. No, it's fine. I don't know how to stop recording. Okay.